Hey everyone. Wow. Here to talk about Gravity Falls Season 1, Episode 19, which is a thing that happened. Yeah. Wow. Where to even start with this one? Um, so I've seen Bill Cipher before. Uh, I noticed that he's in the opening credits a couple of times. The fact that he's basically a cross between the Monopoly guy and the Great Seal of the United States is a thing that I noticed. That Great Seal, in turn, being, if I remember correctly, a Masonic symbol, and thus one that has featured prominently in wacky conspiracy theories for most of American history. But yeah, he's an animate Great Seal with arms and legs and a top hat and a bow tie. And okay. And he's apparently some sort of mind demon. I find it interesting. I mean, the implication here would be a couple of possibilities. One, he's a cipher. He's, an illusion, a stand-in, something flimsy that gives way for something else. Something empty. Another possibility, Bill Cipher, is referring to money. The word cipher shares common roots with, it comes from a word associated with counting. So money and counting money, something to do with that. Yet another possibility, it's an association with codes, ciphering and deciphering codes. Which shares the same root as cipher. It'll cipher as an emptiness, a zero. It all goes back to that old word for zero. Another possibility is that it's a pun on Lucifer. Lucifer, Louis Cipher. That's a name that shows up in some things as an alias the devil uses when walking among humans. So the joke then would be that this is his brother Bill, or cousin Bill, or nephew Bill, or whatever. His relative Bill. Same last name. And honestly, I think he's probably all of those things at once. He is textbook for what we mean when we say over-signified. What it means is something that symbolizes a whole lot of stuff at once. Refers to many things at once. So, yeah. And in addition to seeing him in the opening credits, when I'm scrolling through Tumblr, I am good at spoiler dodging. I am very good at catching words or phrases that immediately signal to me that this thing is a spoiler and I should not read it or look at it. Images, same thing, that say to me, I'm able to say immediately, this is a spoiler, and get away from it before I see the actual spoiler part. It's a little difficult to describe. I think it's related to all the years I spent proofreading, where I eventually developed the ability to detect typos and grammatical errors without actually reading. They just kind of, my eyes just went to them immediately. And the same sort of thing happens here when I'm scrolling through Tumblr. My eyes get drawn towards like Gravity Falls or Dipper or whatever, and I know to immediately not look at the rest of the post and move on. Or to images of these characters and so forth. But sometimes little fragments will slip through. And one of those fragments is the visual of Bill Cipher. I've seen him in a bunch of like fan comics that have come across my dash. Never read any of the fan comics, didn't know what he was, I just knew that that great seal with arms and legs from the opening credits shows up in a lot of fan comics. And has speech bubbles attached, so I knew he was a character. But I never read any of them, so I didn't know anything about him. So now I do. I found it interesting that he told Gideon to buy gold, which is the same thing that a few episodes ago Stan was saying when he was ranting about the apocalypse coming. And then at the end of the episode, when the others maybe defeat him, maybe just impress him enough to let them go. It's not really clear whether he actually lost and is trying to save face by claiming that he's just letting them go, or if he, that wasn't enough to defeat him, but he actually was telling the truth about being impressed enough to let them go. But either way, at the end, he said that, he said some ominous things about bad stuff coming. So, he's obviously connected with the books. I think he's the first thing we've heard about that's in both the journal Gideon has and the journal Dipper has. And I did notice that the page in Dipper's journal that talked about him had blood spatters. So, that's interesting. Some other thoughts? I'm now curious as to how much Stan knows. He seems to think of what happened as a dream. So I'm curious how much of that he dreamed, how much of it he retained. Is it really a dream, or was that just a comment he made so they don't know he remembers it? Because again, he's been, since the first episode, set up as someone who knows more than he lets on because of the whole thing with the vending machine. Speaking of which, I loved Seuss cutting off the vending machine memory. That was a nice little tweaking of the audience's nose, which I think I've made pretty clear by now. I am much more entertained by shows poking gentle fun at fans scrabbling on every little detail to construct their conspiracy theories about what's going to happen. I find that much more entertaining than the actual doling out of clues. So I enjoyed that. I am now racking my brains trying to remember the memory where the door to the memory of the safe. That got flung into a memory from the Bottomless Pit episode. I am trying to remember if that is something that actually happened in that episode. Because, remember, that episode, at least my rather esoteric take on it, implied that to some degree the characters are aware that they're in, particularly Mabel, are aware that they're in a story, and they were able to wrap things around to the beginning by telling the story of wrapping around to the beginning, and thus escape the bottomless pit. At the end of this episode, Dipper suggests that they're still in Stan's mind, that they can, which would imply they can still use the power of imagination. The thing is, that's still thinking in terms of Gravity Falls is a real world, and Stan's mindscape is an imaginary world, a mindscape. But that's incorrect. Gravity Falls is a story. It's as much of a mindscape as Stan's dream world is, which would explain why Bill has any powers at all in the real world of Gravity Falls. It's certainly a thought. I also noticed he had some memories of, like, when Stan was first mentioned to Bill, he had some memories that sort of played across his surface. He turned away from Gideon as if trying to prevent him from seeing them, and it included a young Stan. He has encountered Stan before in some way. So it's really interesting to me, that question of whether Stan remembers Bill being in his mind this time or not. Or if he thinks it was a dream, or if he doesn't remember that aspect of it at all, or if he's covering up that he remembers that aspect. I loved the callbacks to past episodes, the best one being probably the hamster ball shields. Those were very cute, and given their pink color, I think the timing doesn't work out. There's no way it can be a Steven Universe reference, but I want to pretend it's a Steven Universe reference. I love Mabel's kitten fists that she fires. Of course, the minute it's revealed that their imaginations can take form, Mabel becomes the most powerful of them all. And of course she unleashes an 80s style musical number from a bad cartoon. And I enjoy that Bill apparently has a weakness to synthesizer music. Somehow that seems right. I don't really know why. Maybe it's just my, guilty pleasure in synthesizer music that makes me like that. I don't know. What can I do? I'm a child of the 80s. Other thoughts. I mean, yeah, this episode kind of blew me away. It kind of threw me for a loop because I was not expecting any of this. And we got a lot. The relationship between Stan and Dipper is now permanently altered. Because Dipper is starting to understand that Stan is hard on him because he wants him to grow up in a positive way, that Stan sees himself in Dipper. And that was obvious from the start, that Stan sees himself in Dipper. That was clearly the direction it was going. That old thing where somebody overhears part of a conversation and then it turns out to be, misunderstood because they didn't hear the rest of the conversation. That's standard fare. That was probably the weakest part of the whole episode because that's massively overdone. But even so, it was very obvious that Stan was talking about himself. Because we know Stan has a low opinion of himself and dreams of being like this muscular, powerful hero that saves the day. But has a low opinion of himself and goes for the con artistry instead. I think he's trying to guide Dipper away from that, which is interesting because at the same time, Mabel, who is nothing like young Stan, he does things like encouraging her to cheat at poker. I find that interesting. He's very hard on the one who reminds him of himself, and kind of an indulgent, almost corrupting influence on the one who doesn't. But, hey, that's kind of how it goes. I know I'm very glad none of my nieces and nephews remind me particularly of myself, because I would have to be very hard on them. Because... well, I don't want to get too personal, but definitely someone who is like I was when I was a kid definitely needs some guidance to get out of that. I won't say more than that. And of course, Gideon. Of course, Gideon figures into the finale. I assume, anyway. I assume they're not just going to do something completely other for the next episode, although it would be very funny if they did. But Gideon has achieved his goal. He is destroying the Mystery Shack. So, who knows what happens next? I'm also really curious what Bill wanted Gideon to do for him. I'm not sure that was ever clearly established. I was assuming usher in the apocalypse, but that did not happen. You know what? I think in my meandering comments, I never actually said what it was about the memory of the safe being flung into the memory of the bottomless pit. Made me wonder, which was, did that actually happen in that episode? I can't remember. I think the line, whatever that was, it's gone forever, was in the episode. Was it a door that fell in, or was it something else that caused Stan to say that line? Because if it was a door, that's very interesting. Because it's that whole, there are no layers of reality. There's reality and not, and everything in Gravity Falls is not. So, why not have throwing things into memories cause them to actually have happened? And it wouldn't be the first time the show's done something like that. Apparently, the time traveler guy is actually in all of those episodes that he time traveled through. Including ones that were well before the episode where he was introduced. So, the show does do things like that, so it's not implausible. I just can't remember if it did or not. Other than that, basically this was a really good episode. I enjoyed it a lot. And I am going to go render this and then watch the finale, because I ain't stopping here. Thank y'all, and see you in a bit with the finale.